but not as, this is like what they have at the airport. Yeah,
Yep, they do have those right by the terminal.
yeah,
That way, because obviously, God forbid, something happens, they get ambulance, and they get fire trucks in, they're not gonna get destroyed by people hitting it, 70 miles per hour.
yeah.
Okay. We all right?
Is he coming?
He's going to be able to join us.
He's on his way.
He's on his way, but we're gonna get started.
Okay. If anybody else would like a copy, we've got some stuff to review, plenty of extra copies. If 15 people show up, we'll run out, but other than that.
We're gonna call this, Public Works Committee meeting together for Monday, June 23rd at 12 p.m. Can we have the roll call, please?
You do the roll call.
Oh, I'll do that. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
West is here, the chair, and Councilwoman Gibson Williams, and Councilman Davis is on his way. Can I get an approval for the minutes of January 15th, 2025?
I'll approve the minutes for January 15th, 2025. You can second.
My second. So it has been properly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from January 15th, 2025. Now we'll have public comment on agenda items only. So, Mrs. Palmer, at this time, if you would like to, just give some comments like you did in council meeting, as to why we're here.
Tanisha Palmer. And I'm here today to raise the concerns for the community as it relates to the driving and safety policies up on the 1300 block of Tillman Street.
Okay. Are there any other comments you'd like to make?
We'd like to talk about some language or story on anything you'd like to say.
Other than the importance of this project being done to prevent any fatalities to our children up in that area, especially due to the fact that we don't have a hospital, no longer have a hospital as well. So I think it's very important for this project to go into effect as soon as possible.
And I too feel that way, that we had promised you that we would get started with a committee and look into your concerns about the lack of speed bumps, and I think we mentioned some signs as well to slow down the traffic on Tillman Street as it goes from Concord Road down to West 9th Street.
Yes.
So we want to place some added protection on the residents and particularly kids, children up in that area. So we're here today to hear from the Director of Public Works, and we're so glad that you and your family were able to come out today and, provide any concerns and then listen as to what we're working on right now.
Okay. Can I add something else too? Some of the neighbors were sharing too that they have children that have that's autistic, and a lot of them play in it's like the bin is like a hoop in
The cul-de-sac.
yes, and a lot of them were sharing their concerns about that too as well. So
And
maybe they can get like signs saying that, I don't know, children that play, maybe some autistic signs.
We should have some now actually in our garage. Can you email me the specific address?
Sure.
Where you like us to go, and I can write them down.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll get those signs for the, for children who are autistic or, and whatever other signs we can get and put. That's up where Wendy Emmons is. You know Wendy?
It's around like Carler's Lane.
Carlos Lane.
It
Oh,
starts
Carl-
around, yes.
Carlos Way. I did speak to the property manager, Dave, the other day, and he was saying that he'd like to get some type of traffic traffic concerns addressed there on Carla's Way. So Carla's Way would be another area where we could get the signs and what have you. And I think they're more accessible
Okay.
right now, right, Mr. Heyman? Those signs, okay. Well, mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you for your advocacy for not only yourself in the situation that you found yourself in regards to your son, but you're advocating for people that don't have a voice. And that is so much needed and very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Just the other day, there was a child struck up in Upper Chichester. And I don't know if you know about it or not, but that's another grieving mom. And she has to go through that maybe along with little or no support. I don't know all of the details to it, but I do thank you for standing up in our community to ensure the safety of our young people, because all children want to do is play, right?
Right.
And so people don't take it into consideration, the type of damage that is caused when a life is lost. So your preventive measures are very much appreciated, and I thank Councilwoman West and Andrew Heyman for getting on it so expeditiously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your support, Councilwoman.
Always.
Okay, is there anything else before we go to Mr. Heyman?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe a
very
playground. I tried.
So now we're going to have our Public Works Director, Mr. Andrew Heyman. He's done some research, and he has a couple things he wants to share with us. He gave us some handouts as well.
First, I want to say thank you for having me here today, councilors. Thank you, Councilwoman West, for calling this meeting. But I certainly don't deserve a thank you. I think Ms. Palmer brought this to my attention on my literal second day here, which coincidentally, I think my 1 year is tomorrow. So this is something she's been advocating for before I was here. And this is something, the conversations that I've had with council members and with the mayor, this is something that all of them supported before I was here. So I think the credit goes to all of you personally, but I appreciate your kind words regardless. So as a little background, obviously we have, like in many places, serious issues with reckless driving, speeding, particularly in residential areas, but that I would say all over the city. There are, once this was brought to my attention, one of the first concerns that I had, and I spoke with other municipalities in the area, is that there needs to be a standardized process. The bottom line is, in my experience as a former elected official and as a manager in another municipality here in Delaware County previously, that basically every person everywhere thinks their street needs a speed bump. Sometimes, they think even speed bumps aren't enough, and sometimes they're not enough. As an example, when I was the manager in Fallcroft Borough, we had dozens of requests over the years for speed studies to be done, and I can say with one exception in all of those cases, speeding was not an issue. However, and ultimately there were violators were less than 1% of vehicles. However, the perception of speeding can cause confusion, and ultimately in small or narrow streets, or where there are visibility issues, there can still be some danger. And then I would also say that Chester has a particularly bad issue with speeding that I would say is worse than in most other places. And one of the requests I'm putting forward for the capital budget for next year, without getting into all of it, will be for some radar signs that can do speed studies. We have some other equipment we can purchase that we could get very quickly, which may be worth getting as well, to conduct traffic studies, so when residents come to our attention and say, we're dealing with a problem here, we can quantify what that problem is pretty easily. So looked at a number of different places for the process that they use to install speed bumps or speed tables or other traffic calming measures, and as far away as Oregon City, for example, in coordination with our engineer. But I think that the most valuable or that I felt that the most applicable ordinance that I could find in the area that I thought would be most relevant in the city of Chester or most useful to the Public Works Department was an ordinance taken from Concord Township, Delaware County. I provided members of the committee, and I have copies of that ordinance here today for anybody who'd like a copy or would like to read one later. This ordinance sets forth a formalized process by which speed bumps would be installed. And the process I recommend is slightly different. This ordinance is not in final draft for council, but it could be put into final draft very quickly if members of this committee agree on some of the parameters that I recommend. This first, what would happen, and I created sort of a cheat sheet of what that proposal would look like. Councilwoman, I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Yes, can we have a
Sure.
copy of that?
Sure. The cheat sheet?
No, I have I have this, but you said you're adopting it.
I believe the ordinance, Ms. Neal, is the ordinance in the packet? I can hand you a copy if you like.
Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So the first step would be that a resident or potentially a staff member or an official identifies a location where there may be issues with speeding. I think 13th and Tillman is a great place to get started with that because we obviously have an identifiable issue going on there, and it's something that needs to get addressed. Brings this matter to attention of council or the mayor, and then they are provided a petition. This ordinance in Concord Township requires 90% of residents on the block to sign the petition for a speed study to be conducted. My recommendation would be to remove that, to lower that to 50% plus one. And then the next step would be investigation. Public Works staff member, such as myself, or a designated alternative, would go to the location and determine if it meets the requirements for a speed bump, which are mentioned in here, but also are subject to PennDOT regulations. They can't be within a certain number of feet of an intersection or at a certain grade, but there can be some extra work done to examine the location to figure out how, in some cases, a speed bump or other traffic calming measures might be able to handle it. If the location does not meet the criteria for installing a speed bump for any number of reasons, the council members or the mayor could consider alternative traffic calming solutions that might help address some of the concerns residents have. Alternatively, there could be situations, I can't think of one offhand, where maybe speed bumps aren't enough. And so maybe more intensive measures need to be taken. Unfortunately, this process is not overnight. And it's very easy for this council to install a sign, a handicap parking sign, for example, a vote by council, and it's installed very quickly. But in situations like this, it can take a significant amount of time. I would expect at least several months of lag time between an approval and installation. And I would also suggest that if council moves forward, I think the timing here is right as we prepare the 2026 budget so that there can be funds allocated for installing some speed bumps. So after Public Works staff investigates the site, if Public Works doesn't determine out of the gate that there's not some serious issue with the location, which obviously wouldn't be anticipated, then that can go to the engineer. At that point, the city's engineer would go out and actually conduct the measurements that they need to conduct and to design what the speed hump would look like or how it would be installed. That would then get presented to council per this ordinance for vote. So then council members would have the opportunity to vote, like with speed, with handicap parking or other issues, to approve or to consider the installation of the proposed speed bump. And then once that was approved, then it would go to be added to be bid out, presumably, but not definitely, as part of a larger roads program in the future. Again, would take some time, wouldn't be an overnight solution. Unfortunately, that's just not possible overnight, but it can be done. I provided you some examples of the speed bumps versus speed tables that I would recommend be considered. The top image is a speed bump. They're a bit steep. Again, that's probably not the correct engineering term, but when a vehicle collides with it, they they can do damage if the vehicle's moving too fast. That may be fine for a personal vehicle, but emergency vehicles and plow trucks still need to get past these locations. And so I recommend that speed tables be installed in instances where these are approved, or at least generally be installed. That's the bottom image that I provided to you, sometimes known as a speed cushion or pillow. They're softer, there's more of a ramp up. They still would get the attention of the driver, it would still get the driver to slow down, but they wouldn't damage ambulances, fire trucks, things like that as they go through. Obviously, we work with our first responders as well to ensure that this isn't going to be a problem, and so that officers are, or firefighters are aware of the location of these speed bumps also. That's all that I have for right now. So I'd like to hand this over to council members. I guess maybe a last thought as a general timeline. If you could take a look at the traffic calming measures ordinance that I sent you from Concord Township, and if you could take a look at the proposed process. I don't expect immediate answers, and I would say take time with it and think about, you know, if there's anything else that you'd like to see, whether it's another step or perhaps removal or changing in one, or some other questions or comments. I would love feedback. The idea perhaps would be to, in the next 2 weeks, have a roughly finalized ordinance that could be presented to council in 2 weeks, if council is so inclined, for a first vote. That would be my recommendation timeline-wise, but I think this could be pushed to a month if council members would prefer more time with the ordinance or want more information. And at that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman. This is a wonderful report. Councilwoman Gibson, Williams, do you have any questions based on the information that you just received?
Yes, I do. I like the idea of, I like the idea of taking it down to 50 plus 1, because that allows us to move rather quickly, right? So, but my other questions or concerns are, what preventive measures can be taken while we're waiting for all of this to happen? I know you said that we had some signage, but there are several high traffic areas like the Tillman Street and the Carlos Lane. What can we do while we're waiting?
It's a great question.
How long will it take for the signs to be picked up and transported and installed?
If we have signage here on site, which we frequently do for just a generic sign that you would see in any part of the city, those signs are frequently already in stock. And if they're not in stock because they're made so frequently for other municipalities, the manufacturer usually can get them to us relatively quickly, within a few weeks, but potentially even much less. Also, sign facings can be used. They're basically a large sticker that goes on the front of a sign, so you can reuse signs or reface signs that are already in use for the same purpose. So sometimes we're able to do that as well. With regard to other tools, like, for example, temporary speed bumps, we did just get a few of those. My only caution about those is, and I think 13th and Tillman is a good location for something to be considered like that. But is that
temporary?
Yeah, is that, my only recommendation would be that they are still not as costly as permanent speed bumps, but they still can do some of the same damage to emergency vehicles that the heavier duty ones can, and also they damage the road when you screw them in, the permanent ones. There are some that can be put in that don't have to be screwed in. I will tell you, those walk. So you'll install it on one street and it will be on another street, and then it will be in someone's yard. I've seen it, all day, unfortunately. So you need the ones that are screwed into the road. That does damage the road, and obviously we have a limited amount of funds for resurfacing of those roads. So I would encourage council members to do that sparingly while we look at more permanent solutions like this. But I think, if council... The image provided, it's hard to find a good image that gives you the contrast and the height. I would encourage you, you probably see them and it's just sort of the thing that doesn't get internalized. I would encourage you to take a look. Councilwoman Gibson mentioned before the meeting that there are some at the Philadelphia airport. That's a good example of something that I think would be useful here by the arrivals and departures. because they obviously have a need to slow people down, but also have a need for emergency vehicles to be able to get through. So this doesn't look like much on here, but it is actually noticeable, and there should be an effect.
My other question is, the signs that we may have or we may have to order, what verbiage is going to go on them? Because verbiage matters, you know, so, will it be slow down for the kids' safety, kids at play? What kind of verbiage?
So we do have some signage prepared to order that the funding is being contributed by a third party. I can't speak offhand to whom, and I could follow up with that after the meeting. I can give you a copy if you'd like to see of that.
Okay, because I think that's important. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is, can they be enforced? Can they be enforced, the signs? Like, we already know that someone's not going to adhere to what they see. Is there a way that they can be enforced?
Well, Councilwoman, I would say that would be a law enforcement matter I couldn't comment on.
Okay.
And I think that Commissioner Blackwell spoke about some of that, I believe, in the last meeting, but and I would defer to her, and I trust her judgment with that.
Okay.
But what I would say is that I am aware that the state still has not approved local municipalities using radar guns, which would be a game changer. And I am familiar from my previous position, both in Upper Darby and in Fallcroft, of the challenges of municipal law enforcement to actually enforce those laws, because they have to have they're engineered strips on the road that they actually measure with a stopwatch from location to location to get an accurate speed that they are required to use to actually do that. It can be done, and it is done in many places. So I'm not saying it can't be, but and I don't want to speculate much further because I'm not a law enforcement officer, but certainly there is enforcement that can be done.
That would be a conversation for Public Works and Commissioner Blackwell, as well as the engineer, because the engineer can give us the criteria by which we, place the signs, and also the traffic calming device. And then Commissioner Blackwell can let us know, how how it would be enforced, making people adhere to. We can change, the city does have jurisdiction over our city streets, and we can determine anything other than a state street. We can determine the speed limit.
Absolutely, and I will say I will recommend, with the support of this committee, if I receive the support of this committee, that the city purchases radar signs that demonstrate show the posted signage speed limit, and show the speed that the driver is going, and they can also come with flickering red and blue light, sort of like a police officer meant to scare drivers. They're not allowed on PennDOT streets with that light, but you can get multiple different versions, so there could still be those signs on PennDOT streets, but without the red and blue option. Those also can be used for traffic studies, and that's my idea, is to be able to use those not only to deter, to slow traffic, or at least make them aware of their speeds and others around them, but to actually show them how fast they're going. I don't believe that can be used for violations, but but I think it is a good step. And I would also just say, again, the last thing, anecdotally, as a former official myself, my experience has been signage, unfortunately, only works on the people that were already following the law, and that people that don't respect posted speed limits and endanger lives, those people are usually not receptive to signage, unfortunately. But I think it's still important to do, and to send the message that we're taking it seriously, so that maybe, hopefully, drivers understand that there's a risk for them as well for doing it, that the city's on it.
So we'll get together with a team to discuss deterrence and also enforcement, and then strategically where these traffic calming devices will go.
Absolutely. I think it sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
Sure. Do you want to ask it up here so that the question is recorded?
So I know you said that the speed bumps would do damage to first responders and their vehicles, right? So the speed table, at what rate would that slow the car down? Like, what's the difference of it slowing the car down between the speed bump and the speed table?
That's a question I would like to bring to our engineer, if I can give you, if there's a way that it's measured, if there's a difference in how effective they are for slowing vehicles. I'm not sure. I would say that I know that the speed tables are less damaging, and also I think we can plow them, whereas with speed bumps, that can be a problem with plowing the streets. But I don't know that there's like a significant difference, or if there's a measured difference. There may well be. I can look into that for you. Yeah. No problem.
One second.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Justin. I guess I was wondering, I think we're still in the process of trying to put together like a more holistic, street plan for the city in terms of like paving and just improvements on streets. So I guess I'm wondering what kind of consideration would be taken, or just what would the interaction be in terms of like plans for future paving or other improvements with the potential installation of speed bumps. And I guess I'm coming from the perspective of like, we wouldn't want to necessarily install a speed bump only to rip it up soon after, something like that. So just like to hear a little bit about the planning process for that.
Also, a very good question. I would say that's part of the process for the installation in the first place would be in the investigation. Obviously, like you said, for example, where, if a street is to be paved in a few months and you're installing a speed bump, that sort of defeats the purpose of installing it and can cause quite a headache. And actually, the ordinance from Concord Township requests or suggests that there should be consultation with the municipality's comprehensive plan, and so it's a little bit more work looking into it that needs to be done. Is the street paved? And ideally, by the time that this happens, there's probably a more, obviously the situation here is that I can't guarantee what streets are going to be paved in 2 years or even in one, but in many places, and it would be valuable to know sort of 4 or 5 years out what's tentatively on the list to be paved. And so I would suggest, and I believe the general process is, if a street's going to be paved and expected to be paved within the next 5 years, typically it's not added to the list. I think very few streets would probably fall into that category here, unfortunately. Obviously, ideally it would happen, but in the event the street was to be paved, I think there would typically be, the paving would stop at the beginning of the speed table, and it would continue after the speed table, and it would be sealed at those 2 points. That's how I've seen it done in other places. So I don't know if that answers enough. Okay.
Interfere with the new installation, and if you can work around it,
Yep.
that would be better, because there's street before it and street afterward.
And
then, because are you talking about the intersection at 13th and Tillman?
wouldn't be right at the intersection, just north of 13th, if I recall correctly, is the location. North of that intersection. Is that correct, Ms. Palmer? Yeah. And I would even say, just anecdotally, I think all the way from 9th and up is because it's so wide, it's relatively flat, and people just drive fast. Sure, if you'd like to come up.
So I know that on the 10th and 1100 block, due to like the high crime with the shooting and activities that go on up there, it's not really a lot of children that play in that area. I know that on the 11th, 12th, and the beginning of 13th is where we have the issue the most with the traffic. As you experienced the day that you was out there, you and your team, and you saw how the traffic was. Yeah. So, and I also have another question too. What would the time frame look like for a resident or for an individual to report or the petition process, or for them to report concerns about their block? Like, how would that time frame look like? And please excuse me, I'm a little tired. I got
Do not apologize. I think tired all the time in this heat, especially. So I would say that that's up to that portion of it's sort of up to the resident. The city wouldn't be out collecting the petitions personally. Now, council members or mayor may want to participate in that process, or employees on their time off or something like that. The city wouldn't be circulating the petitions directly. I would say it would take, depends how long it would take to get the petitions signed. Anecdotally, that might take a day or two, but it might take weeks or months. You might have residents that disagree or just are hard to reach. That's why I recommended decreasing it from the 90% to 50% plus one, because at the 90%, it could take a very long time to even get in touch with 90% of the households. So.
Is for communities that don't have access to computers, even the families that have literacy challenges. Will there be something posted on the Chester website? Like, how would they be able to even raise their concerns or send in a notification for y'all to come out and check the area out?
I would say that I'd like to hand maybe some of that over to the administration. I don't know that every portion of it, that portion of it's been thought out, but I think it's definitely something that will have to be explored. I would just say my opinion would be that if a resident comes to the building and speaks to staff members, staff could point them in the right direction, or if they come to a council meeting and speak before council, or obviously we have a new CRM application here for the city. They could theoretically be done on something like that. If a resident, in the same way that a resident would report any other complaint to the city now, I would say would be the same way they would report this. And then copies of petitions, blank petitions would be on file, or could be, here at City Hall, so that they could be handed to somebody, so that the person doesn't have to necessarily go download it. That option should be available, but it would be very simple to have a few pages of petitions available for a resident who is so inclined.
Or maybe a way they could access it online, maybe?
Yeah, and that as well. Absolutely. No problem.
And then, when people come in to pay their rent at the Housing Authority, or over at the senior building, or the other building for public housing where they pay rent and stuff, I think that's still open. I have to check. But, there could be a petition there in the office, and I'm sure that the CEO would allow that, because they're trying to get something that's going to not only protect residents outside of public housing, but their residents as well. So I'm sure we can get support from them in terms of, getting the petitions, handed out, or getting people to sign them.
Could we be in touch with Chester Housing Authority, since it's their development, like with Ms. Thompson?
I've already talked to Dave about it, and then I
How
helped.
about the posting for the petitions?
Oh, no, because we're just talking
Right.
about it now. We can get in, but I did speak to Dave about getting the street common devices. He's the property manager for the Housing Authority. And so I'm sure it will be no problem, because he even had said that there may be some way that they could assist. So I want to see what that assistance looks like. Maybe Andrew and I can check with Dave and talk with him, or Cindy, the CEO.
Absolutely.
But getting the petitions out and signed, that won't be a problem. Are there any more questions, comments? So what we're going to do is, I'd like to close the meeting by saying that we have a lot of items on the table that will have to be researched, which is like the installation feedback from the engineer, feedback from law enforcement, and, you know, as to how, once we get these things set up, these measures will be enforceable. And I think, Mr. Heyman, you were going to check specifically on what it would look like, maybe with the engineer, what it would look like if we put a table out. You know, how is that, or will it have an impact on any other future street improvements that will be made in that area?
Absolutely.
Anything else? Did I miss some things? Okay, we're going to, I'd like to get a motion that we're not gonna move it for any type of, decision by council yet. We have more research to do before what we do as a committee, we bring things to the committee, and then once we make a decision as to how we would like to see council, mayor and council move on these things, then, you know, we'll table this for right now. But then in the meantime, can we move forward with getting signage? Some type of signage, like children that play,
Absolutely.
things like that. I've seen that on other streets, and where we have children with autism. I think on another street off of Edward Street, we may have had a sign or something, signage like that. So we can check on what we can do right now, you know, as a preventative to help. You know, if there's anything we can do right now, and then table the other items as we look to get information from those other entities that I had mentioned. Does that sound like a plan? Yeah.
Absolutely, Councilwoman. My recommendation as a next step as well would be to call another Public Works Committee meeting prior to, I don't know that I would choose the date today, but prior to the next meeting in 2 weeks or the one after that. I would request council members send me any input or any requested adjustments to the proposed ordinance, items they'd like to see in or removed, generally speaking, or any questions that you have that come up after this meeting to this draft ordinance, along with this proposed procedure here, this 5-step procedure. I will work with our engineer, discuss some of the questions council members have, and then from Ms. Palmer, and then also request that the solicitor draft an ordinance. I can work with him on that to make sure the wording is correct for our charter that echoes this from Concord Township, with some of the adjustments like the 90% down to the 50%.
That sounds like a good plan to me.
Sure. Thank you.
So, can I get a motion to, we table what we've discussed today for further discussion?
I'll make a motion that we table, what we've discussed today, and what else? What else we got? I'll make a motion to table what we've discussed today, and to put preventive measures in place while we are waiting for these changes to take place.
So move, I second. Of a 2-week notification prior to when we're gonna have another meeting about this? Yeah. Sure.
Only because, Councilwoman, I really appreciate y'all, like this fast meeting. But I don't only just support Chester, I support other surrounding counties as well. So like I said, tomorrow being, Harrisburg, and just like, it's a lot. So if I had it, I could be able to plan my schedule accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Will do. Okay, so, meeting is adjourned if there are no other comments or anything. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Very good
Mr. Heyman,
presentation.
I really